Presentation out of the closet, Reflections of a Feminist Dad. And I mentioned I'll share two gifts that men and women have each given the world. So because this is Pride Month, I thought I'd begin with this photograph from the 1991 Gay Pride Parade in Toronto. And these are gay fathers walking in the Pride Parade. Gay Fathers of Toronto started in 1978. And at that time, gay fathers were very much in the closet, as were all gay men, very much in the closet. And so when these fathers started walking in the Pride Parade, it was amazing to see what happened. Gay fathers would rush out of the crowd and hug them because finally they were being affirmed for who they were. And of course, it was very difficult because for many gay fathers, because they suppressed their sexual orientation. They got married, they had children. And then when they finally came out, it was a very traumatic time for them, for most of them anyway. And one of the most difficult things they had to do was to tell their children that they were gay. Now, the man on the right, Brian Moore, is one of the founders. And his marriage actually survived. His wife stayed with him, and his children remained very supportive. So speaking of children, Father's Day, Dorothy and I thought we'd introduce you to our two children. This is Kira, our oldest child, born in 1981. Photograph on the left was taken 10 or 11 years ago when she was on a vacation. And as you can see, the one on the right, Dorothy and I with Kira at her first Christmas, 1981 Christmas. And you can see Dorothy and I have hardly changed very much at all since that time. And then 3 years later, our son Kevin came along. Kevin is a fire chief and paramedic in Alberta. And the top left was taken a few years ago when Dorothy and I attended a memorial service in Lethbridge for fallen firefighters. And Kevin is a drummer in the Lethbridge Firefighters Pipe Band. And this is Kevin on the right with his wife Darcy and their two boys, Finn and Sean. And then a little later, after this photograph was taken, they were blessed with a baby daughter, Mia, who is now 3 years old. So the same year as that picture of the Gay Pride Parade, I walked in the Sarnia Santa Claus Parade, 1991. This is not me, by the way. Unfortunately, I don't have a photograph of that parade, but I was walking with men in the parade for the first time. And we didn't have people rushing out of the crowd to hug us, but we had many people cheering us as we went along the route down Christina Street. And most of the people who were cheering us were women. So we were carrying a banner, and this is what the banner looked like. This is a photograph of a parade somewhere in the States. It's a white ribbon parade, and that's what we were in Sarnia. We were the White Ribbon Campaign. You can see the white ribbon in the bottom right of the banner. And it says, "I will stand up, speak out, and act to prevent men's violence against women." So in this photograph, there are men and women walking. In 1991, we were only men. And that was because in 1989, you may remember the horrible Montreal massacre when 14 female engineering students were murdered. And that's what got me thinking, why are men not speaking out against violence against women? And I was not the only one thinking the same thing. There were many men across Canada wondering, why is there not a men's organization that addresses this terrible scourge on society? Why are we not standing up with women to say violence against women must end? And so a friend of mine, Richard Poore, and I decided that we wanted to do something about that. And at the same time, we heard about this organization called the White Ribbon Campaign that two men were starting in Toronto. So we contacted them and they invited us to join them to plan how we can launch White Ribbon across Canada. And that meeting in 1990, there was about 15 of us present in Toronto. So let me introduce you to the two men who had the vision to start the White Ribbon Campaign. The first one is Jack Layton. At the time, Jack was a city councillor in Toronto. And of course, you know, he went on to become the leader of the federal NDP party and sadly passed away from cancer. But here he is signing a pledge. These men want to put an end to violence against women. I think in 1992 or 93, we distributed these posters to different places across Sarnia, and we had many men sign these pledges, just as Jack is demonstrating here today, or at that time. The second man who was the co-founder of the White Ribbon Campaign was a friend of Jack's, Michael Kaufman. Michael was a professor at York University. And together, Jack and Michael launched the White Ribbon Campaign. And we, Richard Poore and I, launched a branch of the campaign in Sarnia. And it became very successful. We did many things. We spoke at schools, we spoke at churches, including the Unitarian Fellowship, which is how I came to join the Unitarian Fellowship after I was invited to speak. We invited Michael to come to Sarnia at least twice, where he gave workshops to the school boards and other events. So we did a lot. We worked with the Women's Interval Home. We spoke at candlelight vigils. And now White Ribbon has spread across the world. And Jack is no longer with us, but Michael Kaufman continues to do this important work. He's no longer at York University, but he travels around the world promoting gender equality, because he knows this is so important to the future of humanity. Just to give you an example, the t-shirt on the left is from Australia. You can see White Ribbon Australia at the bottom of the t-shirt. And the poster on the right is from the White Ribbon Campaign in New Zealand. So the White Ribbon Campaign has spread to many, many countries around the world as a result of the vision of those two men in Canada. So that is the gift, one of the gifts I mentioned, a great gift that Canadian men have now given the world. This is a book that Michael Kaufman wrote around the time that White Ribbon was launched, Cracking the Armor, Power, Pain, and the Lives of Men. And it's called Cracking the Armor because you may remember that when Joni Birch talked about stress, I made a few notes of what Joni said. And one thing Joni said was that men are afraid to share or show their emotions. Afraid to show our emotions. We keep them bottled up. And so Michael in this book uses the metaphor of a suit of armor. We have this invisible suit of armor that we hide behind because we're afraid to show our emotions in case we appear to be weak. You may remember last week, Linda Thompson talked about, the little lies that parents tell their children. For example, Santa Claus, he'll come and leave you presents. And the Easter Bunny or the stork, where babies come from. And the one that I loved was when she talked about the meaning or where thunder comes from, because I remember my mother telling me as a little boy, the first time I heard a thunderstorm, I was petrified. And she told me not to be afraid because it was just the angels up in heaven moving their beds around. And those little lies that we tell our children are harmless. But there's one lie that perhaps some fathers tell their sons. And it's a message that is pervasive in society, is that if you're a boy and you cry, that means you're weak. You're not going to grow up to be a real man. Only girls cry. So suck it up, be a boy. So that belief that we grow up with is harming us in many ways. A couple of weeks ago, Jenny Redman talked about the medicine wheel, the 4 quadrants of the medicine wheel. In this image, east refers to our mental health, south, spiritual health, west, emotional health, and north, physical health. And so in order to be healthy, you've got to have all 4 quadrants in balance, as Jenny described. And living in a patriarchal society where boys are told they're weak if they cry, that means we're out of balance. And when you're out of balance in one quadrant, you're really out of balance in all parts of the wheel. And it's not just boys and men who are harmed by patriarchal society. It's women as well, because they are the ones who suffer horribly as a result of patriarchy. So both men and women are suffering as a result of these misguided beliefs and attitudes. I mentioned at a previous service more than a year ago that I'm a volunteer with the Sexual Assault Survivors Center in Sarnia. And a couple of times I have gone along to the Sarnia Sting to do a little exercise called the man box with the players. And this is an exercise. The counselors at the Sarnia Sexual Assault Center said that when they do this by themselves, the Sarnia Sting players really tune out. But when a man comes along and facilitates this with the counselors, they pay attention, because this is the first time they've heard a man talk about some of the things that they're afraid to talk about. And so the principle of the man box is that these are the attitudes or words that society encourages boys to use to describe themselves. Okay, to be a real man, you have to be strong, you have to be tough, hard, you have to be in control, macho, and all these terms. And outside the man box is the words that macho men will use to describe other boys and men who aren't like them. Oh, you're a mama's boy. You're a girl. You're a homo. You're weak. So when we start talking about these things and we ask them, well, what kind of words do you use to describe your teammates? And they'll come up with words like this, insults. Oh, you're a mama's boy, or you're weak, you're gay. And when they start thinking about this, and when they really start to think about it, it really challenges them to realize the harm that they're doing, not only to their friends, but also to themselves. And so what really impressed me the 2 times I've been to the Sting, because these are just young men, some of them are still in high school, and they're away from home, they're living with billeted parents. but they really get into this. They really see why patriarchy is a problem. And they really impress us with how they want to really change, because they can see it's not healthy. And so it's really encouraging to do this work. So the White Ribbon Campaign tries to educate boys about gender equality. This poster here shows a collaboration between White Ribbon Canada and White Ribbon Australia. And of course, White Ribbon started off as a men's organization. We wanted to engage men for the simple reason that there was no organization in the world that was engaging men in addressing violence against women. But eventually we were approached by women who said, look, you know, you guys can't do it alone. Can we help? And so, of course. So we were pleased to collaborate with women. So this slide shows two strong women, two strong feminists, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, the wife of the Prime Minister, and of course, Michelle Obama. And on Women's Day in 2017, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau came under intense criticism from women, because she suggested that women should reach out to men to help advance women's equality. So a wonderful thing to do, but some feminists who are very hardcore don't want to collaborate with men. They see men as the oppressors. And so she came under intense criticism. As a result of that, a couple of feminists wrote an op-ed in the Globe and Mail in defense of Sophie. And one was a professor at Carleton University, a feminist, and another was a feminist in England. And they pointed out that, you know, feminists often think of men as the oppressor and women as the oppressed. But they point out it's not that simple. Around the world, men face social pressures that equate manhood with control and domination. In some cultures, such domination is asserted through brutal initiation rites. And even in Canada here, we've heard lately of boys undergoing these brutal initiation rites, which have happened at the Sarnia sting as well. Boys are taught to accept aggression as normal. They're taught to utilize violence as a method of control, to view women as their property rather than their partners, stifle their emotions, and take risks with their health and safety. Girls are taught to be submissive, endure abuse, and accept that their primary role and responsibility is to serve men and produce children. The harm caused by patriarchy and misogyny, they wrote, goes beyond the individual. It has a profound social cost, undermining economic development and human security. The evidence is unequivocal. Societies with higher rates of gender equality are more peaceful and prosperous. They have lower levels of corruption, lower levels of violence, and higher levels of economic competitiveness. Both men and women are healthier and happier. And so the second gift that I want to share is the gift that women have given the world, the gift of feminism. And we know that men who proudly declare themselves as feminists often come under ridicule. There are many men who despise Justin Trudeau because he has publicly stated that he is a feminist and has gone to great lengths to have a gender-balanced caucus. I've heard men refer to Justin Trudeau as a soy boy. A soy boy is an alt-right, a far-right insult to feminist men because they equate soy with estrogen. So as I said, Michael Kaufman is still doing this important work to advance gender equality around the world. And a couple of years he wrote this amazing book that I would encourage every man to read. The Time Has Come, Why Men Must Join the Gender Equality Revolution. Michael says the work to win women's rights, gender justice, and gender equality is the greatest revolution in human history. And he talks about his early days in White Ribbon Campaign, and even has a reference to coming to Sarnia and working here with men locally. So this is Justin Trudeau. That is not Sophie Gregoire, of course, that is Melania Trump, greeting each other at the G7 meeting, a photograph that got, raised eyebrows around the world. The man beside Melania, you can only see his arm and shoulder, is of course her husband, Donald, who is looking very unhappy. So why is Melania so enamored with Justin? Not just because he's a good looking guy, but because at the G7 conference, Justin Trudeau advanced gender equality. And he wanted, and he brought in Michael Kaufman and other advisors to help prepare for the G7. And they did a lot of preparation prior to the conference. And Justin tried to convince that all leaders of all 7 countries should make gender equality part of all their discussions during the conference and in all their government decisions afterwards. It had limited success, but one concrete positive thing that did result from the G7 that year was that all countries, except one country, pledged $3.8 billion for girls' education in the global south in developing countries. The only country that refused to contribute to that fund was Donald Trump's United States. And I call it Donald Trump's United States because that is not characteristic of the real United States. Under Joe Biden, that would not have been an issue. So gender equality has to start at the top. It's wonderful that Prime Minister Trudeau was willing to take that leadership initiative. And just to finish off, we need to talk about toxic masculinity and toxic theology. We know that the major Abrahamic religions are all patriarchal in their origins, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This painting of Jesus holding an AK-47 is painted by a guy in the States, and he's painted a lot of these pictures with Jesus holding many different weapons. And he sells these online. He says he paints these for satirical reasons. They're meant to be satire. But most of his customers, pretty well all his customers, are far right, white supremacists, and evangelical Christians. This book, which has just come out, Jesus and John Wayne, I haven't read it, but it's how white evangelicals corrupted a faith and fractured a nation. It's about how they've turned Jesus into a macho man who wants to carry a gun. It's terrible. And 21 years ago, when I first ran for the Green Party, at the time, the Green Party was advocating for stricter gun control laws in Canada. And after an all candidates meeting, I was approached by a Christian high school teacher who screamed at me with his eyes bulging that when Jesus comes back to earth, he will want to carry a gun. So this toxic theology and toxic masculinity has been around for quite a while. So this is what healthy masculinity does. It helps us to have healthy relationships with our children, with our sons and daughters, so that they'll grow up to think of us as heroes, and that we won't corrupt them. Happy Father's Day. So our closing